Welcome to the Start Something Show. Join world-renowned experts, change agents, and everyday folks who have done the amazing. All here to help you start something incredible. Now it's time to step out, live your perfect day, and create a legacy with your host, Tina Dietz.
Hello, Superstarters. It's time for another episode of the Start Something Show. I am your hostess with the mostest, Tina Dietz. And today on the show, we're going to be interviewing Les Hewitt, who is the best-selling author, like New York Times best-selling author of The Power of Focus, which he co-authored with Jack Canfield. Before we get to that today and have that awesome conversation with Les, he is such a great guy, super mentor. Really looking forward to having more of that conversation with him today. We are going to talk about Don't Be That Guy. Quite honestly, this is my favorite segment. Okay, so our Don't Be That Guy this month is the guy who talks big but delivers nothing. We've all been to those sales pages and all heard those people speak who just go on and on and on about how wonderful what they do is, but they don't actually give you any evidence of why that's true. You get on a webinar or a teleclass, or you download their audio, or you download their ebook expecting to have some answers and have some guidance and have some tools. And it's just a lot of regurgitated blah, blah, blah. Don't be that guy, okay? Don't be the guy who talks big and delivers nothing. The human brain really only retains about 10% of information when they hear it. So it's okay to give away some of your best bits. Show people what you're made of. You know, you got a lot to call on. You've got plenty. So there's no scarcity in making sure that people have some of your best information, even if it's for free. So hashtag Don't Be That Guy on Twitter. If you want to share with us a Don't Be That Guy moment, if you have a Don't Be That Guy spotting in your business ventures, or shoot us an email on the contact page at thestartsomethingshow.com and let us know about your Don't Be That Guy experience. If we feature your Don't Be That Guy on the air, we will acknowledge you on air and send you a gift. Our guest speaker today, Les Hewitt, is known as the Focus Coach by his peers and his clients. He is the founder of the Power of Focus coaching program, a unique focusing system for business leaders who want greater profits, less stress, and more time off. Let's hear it for more time off. Yay! The Power of Focus has worked with more than 300 companies in Canada, the United States, Australia, the UK, and the Republic of Ireland. Les is also the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Power of Focus. And The Power of Focus has sold more than 825,000 copies, is available in 21 languages, and there are currently 6 books in the series. Les's work is all about how the power of focus can help you hit your business, personal, and financial targets with confidence and certainty. Les, thanks for starting something with me today.
I'm really looking forward to it. My great pleasure, Tina.
Mine too. Let's get right into it because I'm really, really curious. You know, we're all about getting started here. So why don't you take us back to when you were getting started? When did you know you wanted to change your life and start something?
Well, I was born and raised in a very peaceful little place in Northern Ireland called Belfast. And when I grew up, it wasn't that peaceful. In fact, it turned into a war zone, unfortunately. But just to give you a little back history, my dad worked in a big hospital in Belfast, and he was a clerk there. And, you know, his generation, it was get a job, stay there until you're 65, and that's great. Live on the pension. And he was in that job for 44 years. So when I left school, I was into sports, really loved sports, but didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. When I left high school, my dad said, well, forget university or college. It's too expensive. Get a job, find something that you're going to stick with. And I really didn't have a clue. And 2 weeks later, he came back and he said, I've got an interview at the hospital for a job. So I go to this interview, and it's for a student medical laboratory technologist. And about a month after that, I'm starting working in the lab at the Belfast City Hospital. Now, I should say right now, my worst subjects, Tina, in high school all the way through were math and science.
Oh, no.
Worst subjects. I had no coaching, no mentors that I developed later, but I drifted into that job. I did some exams. I got a qualification, and I spent 8 years there, and eventually specialized in hematology, which was looking down microscopes and counting blood cells and figuring out who had leukemias and all sorts of blood disorders.
Oh, wow.
When the troubles really got to a peak in Northern Ireland, I decided I wanted to travel, wanted to see a bit of the world. And I got a job in Calgary in Canada. Never been there, never been to Canada, didn't know much about Calgary, apart they had a stampede or something. And I ended up actually supervising the hematology lab at the Calgary General Hospital, which was the biggest hospital at the time in Calgary. And I had 20 people to supervise, mostly women. I was so out of my depth, Tina, it wasn't funny. And I managed another 6 years there. So I was a total of 14 years in the completely wrong career. And the big breakthrough for me was I had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, I suppose. And I realized that there were very few discos in Calgary. So I started my own little disc jockey business on the weekends. And that was going great. It was a lot of fun and it allowed me to express myself in a different way. And I was doing a Christmas party for this direct sales company, a little company called Bestline Products. And they were like a mini Amway. And I had never heard of network marketing or anything like that. But I got recruited by this company by a very persistent distributor. It took him 3 months to get me down to a presentation. But he never gave up. And I went to the presentation, and I was absolutely blown away. I couldn't sleep that night. And it was like, if you work harder, you'll make more money. That wasn't happening at the lab. And so after a lot of thought, I was married and young family starting. I just dived into this direct sales opportunity and part-time and became the #1 distributor in Canada. And Fran, my wife, worked with me part-time. And I met the man who changed my life. And we all need mentors, and you probably know or have heard of Jim Rohn.
Yes,
and Jim Rohn was actually the international vice president of training for this company, Bestline. And I first met Jim on the old audio cassettes. I'd never seen anything or heard anything like that. Very, very simple educational message that he had. It took over a year before he showed up in a live seminar. And that just triggered me even more. So I really got into personal development, fascinated by that. I actually used to bring Jim's audio cassettes into the hematology lab, and I'd bring my staff into the library and tell them to listen to these cassettes. And I was almost fired for that. But that sparked me into doing something myself, and I went to lots of seminars, and I ended up actually starting a company called Achievers Canada, and basically ran that for 12 years, brought in over 100 of the top speakers, all the big names of the day, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, of course, every year, on and on and on. And we did over 450 major events in Canada.
Wow.
And that spread into the U.S., and it was a wonderful education for me, Tina, because every month I'd have these experts fly in. We would do 5 programs in Alberta, and I had 3 days with them. And we would drive in the car, and I'd have people like Zig Ziglar in my car for 3.5 hours, just the two of us, and I'd be just picking his brains like crazy. So it was like a free university, and that went on for 12 years. And we did special events, 2-day programs, 3-day programs, and that really was the start of everything. And then I went into group coaching. I started coaching business leaders, groups of about 30 people. I had a 3-year program. And that was incredibly satisfying because, you know, I could really stick with the people and see the success stories as they unfolded and also the real challenges that they were having at the time. I was very, very blessed with some fantastic mentors during that period. Another man called George Adair, who was very, very high on my scale as a terrific mentor. And he ran a program called Omega based in Phoenix, Arizona. And these were 3-4-day, really intensive personal development programs. And he never charged for them. He did this for 30,
Really?
He did this for 30 years. And it was like, if you want to come, just come along. And if you got something out of the 3 or 4 days, leave a donation so that somebody else can also benefit from this as well. He had seminar companies coming to these incredible programs trying to figure out how he had waiting lists for 3 or 4 months, people trying to get into this program. And it was all by donation. But he changed my life radically, and my wife, Fran's, as well. We got very involved with that. We became support staff, learned to facilitate. And there were probably 4 or 5 other people out there, Dan Sullivan, Ed Foreman, Jack Canfield, just great people. And I think that's a lesson for everybody, that it changed my life. It's who you surround yourself with. And if you choose,
very
if you choose to surround yourself with people that are wise, people that are ambitious, people that are stimulating intellectually, people that can teach you how to change your attitude and set goals. I'd never been told how to do that. And again, Jim Rohn was the first person that led me down that path.
Now, you had mentioned that the experience with the Omega trainings changed your life and your wife's life radically. What's maybe one thing that stands out for you that was a huge contribution to you and your family?
Well, one of the things that George, he was the best facilitator I have ever seen, and to this day I have ever seen. He sadly passed away a couple of years ago in his 70s, but he had this ability to just get past the surface stuff and go right to the core of what any issue was. And really the breakthrough for me, Tina, was he taught me what win-win was. And, meaning that, don't worry so much about what you're getting. Make sure the other person is getting more. And that, I knew that to a point. Jim Rohn and other teachers would talk about that, but George really brought that home. Another thing that was a tremendous breakthrough for me was he showed me that I tended to seek approval. And he showed me how to be more authentic and tell it the way it is and not worry about what other people are thinking.
That's a huge thing. Yeah, that's a huge
lesson.
And
I find that so many people, and you probably see this yourself, that we do things simply to get approval, and we're not showing up as our authentic selves. And there was so much more, but, those were some of the key things that really worked for me.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Now, along this pathway that you created for yourself, we all deal with setbacks. And something we want to make sure here for people listening on the show, we want everyone to know that failure is not a dirty word. We learn so much from our setbacks. So what setbacks or failures have you had to deal with, and how did you deal with them?
Well, I know this sounds a bit cliche, but I tend not to use the word failures. To me, life gives us experiences, and sometimes we make wrong choices because we're not informed well enough, or our emotions get in the way, or we see something that's a quick fix when it really isn't. So when I look back, I can think of an investment or two where I made stupid decisions. I'll give you an example. There was a group of professionals, particularly I think they were vets and dentists and people like this, lawyers, and they were all from the UK, most of them. And I was friends with a couple of them, and they said, we're going to build a British pub in Calgary. And at that time, apparently, there wasn't a British pub in Calgary, and it was a restaurant as well. And they actually imported an entire pub from Nottingham in England.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
They shipped the whole thing over to Calgary. It was like, it's just ridiculous.
Shipped a pub.
Yeah,
wow.
Piece by piece. And they built it in downtown Calgary. And unfortunately, one of the big recessions was just about to happen. Of course, we didn't talk about that.
Oh, man.
The building, which was a terrific location right in the middle of Calgary, right downtown, but the landlord suddenly just jacked the rates up. There were all sorts of stories. But
comedy of errors, yes.
And we hired a manager who apparently had run a pub restaurant before. But the truth was, none of the people in the investment group, and I didn't invest very much, but we knew nothing about pubs and restaurants. And then it turned out that this manager they hired was actually embezzling the whole company. He was taking money out of the till every night. He ended up in jail.
Oh, wow.
So the big lesson I learned was stick to what you know. And don't dive into things you don't have any clue about. And even worse, the people that you're going in with, they don't have any clue about it either. So I'm very careful now that when I invest in anything, it has to be in alignment with my purpose, what I know something about, and that's been a huge lesson for me.
Yeah. Well, following on to that, what would you say is the biggest business risk you've ever taken?
Well, I think, for any budding entrepreneur, it's a real risk to step out from security. And I was in that so-called very secure job for 14 years. Could probably never be fired, in the hospital environment. And, you could really just stick there until you get your pension and away you go. And a lot of people do that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not judging that, but it wasn't right for me. And so for me to take a leap of faith and say, I'm out of here. And I'll give you an example. I finally wrote my resignation letter, Tina, to the lab supervisor. And I procrastinated, I would say, for probably 3 years before I had the courage to leave the lab and that so-called security. And, we had a young family. My wife, Fran, wasn't working. We had made a decision that she was going to stay with the kids and be at home. And I was fine with that. But I wasn't making a lot of money. And the day I walked in with my resignation letter to Murray, my supervisor, and I give him the letter, he opened it, and he looked up at me and he said, Les, this is probably the single worst decision you will ever make in your life. Have a nice day.
Oh,
and
what a thing to be confronted with.
Gee, And at this time, I was just starting into that little company, Bestline, in direct sales, and he just thought that had absolutely no chance. And so I sort of jumped right out of a 14-year so-called secure profession and into the crazy world of direct sales and entrepreneurship. And it really was a leap of faith. Yeah, I did a lot of praying around that.
Yes, absolutely.
But, the interesting thing was when you dive into something and you believe that, you've got the talent and ability. And this is what Jim Rohn really impressed on me, Tina. He said, I think you can do better. I don't think you're supposed to be a lab tech. And I think you've got other skills that you need to explore. So the big thing that I've learned is, and you've heard this so many times, you've really got to figure out, what am I really good at? What are my gifts? And I believe that everybody is born with some sort of a talent or they develop it. And a big part of life is just figuring out what that is. It took me a long time. But, when I moved into that direct sales arena, I really enjoyed it. It energized me. I realized I had some skills there. I had no training whatsoever in sales, but I just enjoyed the people, the whole challenge of personal development and growth, which was a big part of this company. And, of course, the money just, like, we got a $30,000 bonus over and above our commissions in the first 6 months. Now, $30,000 back then in 1979 was a lot of money.
It's still nothing to sneeze at, to be honest. And, for someone who had been used to receiving a steady paycheck to have that kind of sudden influx based on your own efforts, that must have been quite the sensation.
And that was the exciting part. There was another Jim Rohn and Jim Stevenson. Jim was the actual person that did the presentation. And as I said, he did such a great presentation, I realized afterwards, I couldn't sleep at night. The thought that if I just worked harder and put more effort into something, I could actually make as much money as I wanted. There was no limit on it. That was totally foreign to me. And getting around a group of people that really cared for you and supported you and taught you, in a matter of 2 years, our lives had totally changed.
Wow. That's a pretty short period of time to make that kind of a leap in the great scheme of things. Let's see now on the kind of the opposite end of things. Let's take a moment and talk about your book. Your first title, The Power of Focus, that you co-authored with Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, it hit a #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. How did that opportunity come about?
Well, I never saw myself as a writer, Tina. When I was at school, the only thing I wrote was a little article for the local school newsletter, and it was about our hockey team. And that was field hockey, by the way, not ice hockey. And that's all I did. And, I find it very easy to write, but I never thought at all of writing anything. But after going through years of this personal development and my Achievers Canada seminars and then the group coaching And I had so much material put together that I thought, I think I should write something about this and maybe turn it into a book, because then I can impact more people, hopefully, because groups of 30 people was my limit, though I had several groups. And I'd known Jack and Mark for quite a while. I had them up in my seminar program 2 or 3 times, particularly Jack. And so I outlined a book. I had no name for the title. I just jotted down 10 potential chapter headings. I knew I could fill that out, and I decided to fly down to California and meet them and say, look, I got an idea for a book. You guys are in the middle of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Would you like to do something different? Would you like to co-author with me? And they just said, they looked at the outline and said, yeah, we'd love to do something like that. We're up to our ears in chicken soup. It would be nice to do something a little different. And I said, well,
a little less soup, a little more meat. Yeah.
And so I said, well, look, you guys are super busy, with all this going on. Here's the deal. I'll write the book. I've got tons of content. You can add whatever you want to it. And of course, give me some guidance. That would be great. But the biggest thing I'm looking for is a publisher. I don't know anybody. I don't have the time to go around chasing for publishers. I know it's not easy for getting your first book out. How can you make that happen? I'm in Jack Canfield's office that day, and he says, hang on a minute. And he lifts the phone. He phones the publisher at HCI who publish all the chicken soup books. And he gets on the phone with the publisher, and he said, I've got a friend of mine in my office, Les Hewitt. He's got a book idea. We like it. We're going to co-author with him. When can we do it? In 30 seconds, the publisher said, yeah, we can get that out next May.
Wow.
30 seconds. Now, I call that leverage.
That's a lot of leverage.
It's a lot of leverage. And again, it's getting around people that have got influence. And it's so important. I learned that lesson that, one of the things I ask people is, who are the top 5 people in the next 12 months who can give you the biggest leverage in your business or in your life or financially? And if you just focus in on 5 people who've got influence, who can maybe open up a door, help you in some particular way, literally, you can just accelerate at a tremendous rate. So I wrote the book. I really got into it, and, it took 9 drafts and a lot with Jack's, advice, and he likes to get books 10 out of 10. Chicken Soup had a rating score of, it had to be a 10 every story. And so after 2.5 years, we go back and forward. And he said, I think the book, still no title, is an 8.5 out of 10. I said, Jack, I got to let this thing go. I got to get out of here. And he said, here's the deal. Take 3 months off, then come back and finish it. I said, are you kidding? And he said, no, take 3 months off. So I took the summer off, came back, looked at it one more time with fresh eyes, and got some feedback from a readers panel we put together. And I made about 200 little changes to the last draft. Now, these were not major things, just little things. And he said, that's a 10. We didn't do a lot of marketing, Tina. Like, we had a little 30-day run with radio and a bit of TV. I was on tour.
Well, the Chicken Soup for the Soul machine at that time was rolling pretty hot. So you really, talking about leverage, being part of that train, the momentum was there. Yeah,
their names in Chicken Soups absolutely helped. And here's the funny part. I didn't know it got the #1 in the New York Times. I'll tell you how recent it was. Like, the book went out in 2000, May 2000. And it did hit a bestseller list like the Wall Street Journal and other lists that I probably don't even know. But I was moving out of my office just over a year ago, and I was going through a lot of old boxes, archives, and I pulled this piece of paper out, and it was actually a clipping from the New York Times, 2001. And I looked at it, and it said The Power of Focus #1, and #3 was what's the famous guy? He does the show. Oh, it'll come to me.
Dr. Phil?
Dr. Phil. He was #3. I thought, wow, we got the #1 in the New York Times. And I only knew that a year ago.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's funny.
So, but,
oh, that's so funny. So, start to finish, when you first start with, from the moment you started putting the outline together for the book, all the way through it hitting the shelves, how long was that period of time?
Well, for me, first starting to write and getting Jack and Mark's co-authorship was about 2.5 years. But, I still have my business to run. They were involved in a lot of things. But, it was the 9th draft. It took 9 full drafts. And when I get focused on something, I think when you write a book, it's got to be the best book you can possibly write. And I had all this wonderful material, and then it's, well, how do I write it? I think your personality is so important in the book. I wanted a very conversational style. I wanted the reader to feel like I was just speaking to them. It had to be easy to understand, practical action steps, entertaining. We put cartoons and humor in it. And so that way of formulating it seemed to impact people. And I think the biggest thing, despite Chicken Soup, obviously that was great to have their names on the book, but it really was word of mouth. There were people telling lots of people, and because we only really marketed this for about 30 days. And I didn't do any major marketing, and, the guys were still very busy with Chicken Soup, but their name obviously helped tremendously with it.
Well, we're coming to the end of our show here, but I know we're going to be continuing on talking together, Les, and getting into some of the more of the meat of the matter in terms of talking about what it takes to actually create focus in your business in our Backstage Pass portion on the site. But I want to leave our listeners today with a little bit of action steps, some advice from you directly. So if you were imagining that you were just starting out today, let's say you've got that resignation letter written and you're not quite sure what to do, and you had your knowledge, but you didn't have the resources that you've developed over the years, what would be some of the first 2 or 3 things that you would do to start something today?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm sure there's several parts to that. But the first thing for me was to figure out what I was really good at. So focus on what you do best and let go of the rest. And, so for me at that time, it was sales was something that I realized I was good at, and then just finding a particular opportunity and just zeroing in on that one opportunity, not trying to do 3, 4, 5 things. So, and today, when I look at 3 things that I'm really focused on, what I do best, one would be writing, of course. The second would be coaching or speaking, and the third one would be creating products. I've got 3 more books that I want to write, and I've got more audio programs and video I'm just starting to get into. So, figure out what you do best and put all your energy into it. The second thing that really changed everything for me was changing some habits. And creating a champion mindset is a habit. And I was probably just going along, definitely not with a champion mindset. It was just, I guess I got to go through 40 years in this job like my dad did. So changing your habits one at a time, if you change 2 or 3 habits a year and you do that for a few years, you can absolutely transform anything in your life that you're not happy with. And one other little practical step I learned, I see people with all these to-do lists every day, and I used to do that. I was overwhelmed with all these things. I never got the list finished. And then it would roll into the next day and so on. And a far better strategy I figured out is don't plan your day. And, some people are going to really react to that. But design your week and focus on the top 3 priorities that you need to get completed each week. There's a massive difference between designing your week and having to-do lists every day.
Very true. Very true. That offers a lot more flow and a lot more room for flexibility than a laundry list of things to check off.
Yeah, and it's made a huge difference for me. I've just, I keep refining these systems that I work on, these focus systems, and I'm into another level of that, just working on it at the moment. But yeah, it's one step at a time.
That it is. Thank you for all of your wisdom today, Les. Folks, remember to join us for our Backstage Pass for more with Les Hewitt and the power of focus. And Les, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone, get out there and start something.
Start something with purpose. Start something with freedom. Start something now. Go to thestartsomethingshow.com, join our community of superstarters, and get your perfect day planner pack, a free resource to help you create the life you've dreamed of living. Take action now, and we'll see you for our next exciting episode.